Hello and welcome back to So You Got a Life Sci Degree. We're your hosts, Farida and Lisa, two life sci undergrad students trying to navigate our future careers. This is episode 19, and we're talking to Dr. Dianne Saxe about being an environmental lawyer and advocate. How are you doing today, Lisa?
I am doing okay. I'm a little too underslept for interviewing someone like Dr. Saxe, but it is okay. I did have an interesting night yesterday, though. So as of this recording day, I am moving into my new apartment in Hamilton in a week from now. And so I've been starting to do all my packing. I ordered some stuff from IKEA a week or two ago. And, it came in various boxes, and one of the boxes contained a bunch of dishes, and it said fragile on the box and everything, right? And so it was kind of weird. The dishes were kind of wrapped in this, I don't know, I've never seen wrapping paper like it. The best way I can describe it is it's kind of a mix between a honeycomb and wrapping paper. It was weird. But yeah, it seemed to be effective at the cushioning. And so I was like, okay, I'm not going to unwrap these individual dishes just because I think I can just bring this whole thing as is.
Right.
But then last night I was like, okay, maybe I should open it and check to just make sure everything's there and that nothing's broken. And good thing I did that, because the top several dishes were okay.
Yeah.
And then as I got to the middle, I purchased this one pot for a plant that I'm getting from some friends, and the saucer of the pot was broken.
No.
And as well, this other bowl had a chip on it, and then the very bottom of it, I think the two large plates that I ordered completely broken.
Oh no.
I couldn't even take them out to take a photo, because I took a photo of some of the other stuff because I wanted to send IKEA, be like, hey, this happened. Yeah, so that happened, and so I'll probably get a refund of a bit, and then it's okay. I kind of need to go again anyway. So yeah, but yeah, so the funny story that came out of this was that because the pot, only the saucer broke. The pot is in great condition, and the friends that I'm getting this plant from, who is a Pelia plant. If you don't know that, look it up. It's also called the pancake plant. It's very cute.
I like how you called it a who, not a that.
Okay, but I know that people make jokes about talking to plants like they're sentient, but this plant has character. The way its leaves, I don't know, man. I'm excited. But yeah, anyway, so I'm planning on calling her Leah the Pelia. I've been, it's something that I've been thinking about for, months and months. I'm very excited about it. And so yeah, so I have these two friends who have a bunch of Pelia plants because, the thing about plants is that they're good at reproducing. And so they're giving me one of their little pups. And so I was like, in exchange, do you want this pot? Because it doesn't have a saucer. Because if they're going to refund me the pot, they'll refund me the whole pot,
right?
Not just a saucer, right? Because it comes in packs. So I was like, oh, I might as well just give you this pot. And so that's what's happening. They're giving me a plant. I'm giving them a pot.
Very cute.
Yeah, it's all gonna work out.
Yeah, when you were talking about your honeycomb packaging, I was like, wait.
Hexagons are the best of
yeah.
Okay, I don't think it's actually hexagonal though.
Oh, what? Then what on earth makes it honeycomb if it's not hexagonal?
Sorry, it's just it's kind of got a repeating pattern to it. It looks honeycomb-like. I don't think it's actual hexagons. Yeah, interesting. Well, but I mean, I don't know. maybe if it was hexagonal, then the dishes wouldn't have broken.
Yeah, exactly.
For the listeners, we're referencing the video by CGP Grey called Hexagons Are the Bestagons.
Yeah, ever since watching that video, I just see hexagons everywhere. Everywhere.
Yeah, that was, me in second semester organic chemistry.
Yeah.
It's that tree of benzene.
Yeah, exactly.
It looks like a benzene. Yeah. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I have finals right now, so I've been pretty...
This is your last semester. You're graduating. That's crazy.
Indeed, yes.
You have not been playing it up. Every time I mention to Farida that she's graduating, her eyes go sideways. She goes uh-huh.
I feel like that sums up my general emotions towards graduating. But yeah, so I've just been pretty boring for the last week and a half from just studying and playing
just
Minecraft.
The last week and a half.
Wow.
I'm kidding. You're very interesting. Please,
Lisa's doing air quotes for the listeners.
I think when people do air quotes, it's also evident in the voice.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, The only like somewhat tiny bit interesting thing that's happened in the last week and a half was that I bought a bunch of dishes from Facebook Marketplace, and I got such a
Wow, you don't have to rub it in, Frida. Like, I get it. You're good at buying dishes, unlike me.
Yeah, the funny thing is I don't even need them. Like, I have so many. I don't
Oh.
know how many people
Wait,
I'm
why
ever
are you buying dishes? This is like very not in character.
because it was such a deal, and I was like, oh my god.
Okay, fine. Are they at least cute? Like,
Yeah,
is it
I
a
like them. If
set?
they
Like,
weren't cute, I wouldn't have bought them. Like, I do
can I see
actually
them?
like them.
Like,
Sure.
we're literally
Yeah,
video
sure. One
calling right
second.
now.
Okay, for context, they're not cute in a way that like Lisa would find them cute. They're like in a very boring adult kind of nice.
Whoa, wait. I can appreciate a plain adult dish. All my dishes from IKEA are plain white, and I think they look amazing. So
Okay,
so
great.
don't put words into my mouth.
Okay, so what I got for $20 was
Okay.
4 bowls that look like this.
Bro,
And then 6 of these tinier plates.
you got the exact same dishes as me.
And then 6 of these larger plates.
Oh my god, you literally got the exact same dishes as me. Like, okay, Frida's holding up like a medium-sized white bowl, and then like a larger white plate, and then like a set of smaller white plates. Like, that's exactly what it got, except my large plates broke and half of the bowls broke.
So yeah, I'm excited.
Congratulations. So, Frida, what is our squirrel of the week?
So this week's squirrel is Tim's box squirrel.
Oh.
And this is actually a squirrel that I also saw when we went to get hot dogs that one time. I'm telling
my
you, there were
goodness.
so many squirrels.
How do you recognize him or her?
I mean, I only saw them once, and then I don't know if I saw them again. Like, I just
Okay.
yeah. But basically, yeah, when we were getting hot dogs, we were walking back, and in the kind of entrance part to McGill, there was a squirrel. The squirrel basically perched up onto the side of a trash can, and then like held themselves there, and then went into the trash can, got a Tim's box out.
No.
Yeah, I'm not even joking. Got the Tim's
my
box out, and then
goodness.
yeah, left the trash can with the Tim's box, and then opened
Wow.
it and like ate the stuff inside that was
Wow,
left. Yeah,
that's crazy.
it is insane.
This is the convergence of squirrels and raccoons. Like, they're learning from each other. That's a little scary.
It was wild.
Wow. You know, it's funny because I actually bought a tiny 10-pack of Timbits about a week ago, and I was just looking at the box and just appreciating like how good the design was. Like, we're not sponsored by Tim's, but it says Timbits on the box, and then the 2 eyes in Timbits, like the dots are Timbits. It's so good. And they got like little legs on like the different Timbits. It's really good.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure how securely closed the box was, but
Right,
you know,
yeah. I mean, I feel like it's a tin box. Like, if you just punch it.
yeah,
like,
yeah. I'm sure that like, if you extend enough
Yeah.
effort, it will open at some point.
Yeah, I want to see a squirrel do a Rubik's Cube. Then I'll be impressed.
Yeah.
Or like, oh my god, if squirrels can learn to open those like medicine bottles.
Oh my gosh. Then they would have surpassed children, human children.
Actually, I think they would have just all died because I think it's really easy for a squirrel to overdose on Tylenol.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah. Good thing they can't do that yet.
Yeah. Also, this morning I actually spotted Cloudberry again, but
Oh,
I
my
usually get
goodness.
food without my phone, so I couldn't take a photo or anything.
Oh,
But yeah.
wow. Well, I mean, you spotted Cloudberry or a cousin.
Yes,
slash.
the conspiracy still lives
Yes.
on, so we'll see. Yeah. All right, ready for an interview with Dr. Saxe?
I am nervous and ready.
This episode is sponsored by Resume Worded. Resume Worded is an AI-powered online career platform that gives you instant tailored feedback on your resume and LinkedIn profile. They offer 3 main tools: Score My Resume, which uses AI technology to instantly score your resume according to what recruiters are looking for; Targeted Resume, which analyzes job descriptions to identify important keywords and skills missing from your resume; and LinkedIn Review, which identifies gaps in your profile to increase your visibility. Each of these features provides specific feedback to help you get past automated resume filtering and land interviews. They both offer free tools and optional paid features. I've been using Resume Worded myself for the past few months, and am finding it really improves my job applications. I'm consistently surprised by how many weaknesses it is able to identify and the helpfulness of the step-by-step feedback. I'm also subscribed to their email newsletter. I normally hate email newsletters, but this one genuinely provides succinct and helpful advice that I would have never thought of otherwise. To check them out, visit resumeworded.com.
This week's guest is Dr. Dianne Saxe. Dr. Saxe is an internationally recognized environmental lawyer. She holds a Bachelor of Laws and a PhD in environmental law from York University. She worked as legal counsel and director with the Government of Ontario for 14 years early on in her career. Following this, she worked as the principal at Saxe Law Office, an environmental law boutique, for 25 years. Dr. Saxe was the Environmental Commissioner of Ontario from 2015 to 2019 and is currently the deputy leader of the Green Party of Ontario. She has recently reopened her law practice, Saxe Facts Law Professional Corporation. She also does outreach work through public speaking, her website Saxe Facts, and her podcast Green Economy Heroes. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Saxe. Very excited to have you.
Oh, thank you for having me.
All right, so the first question we have for you is enlighten us. Like, what does being an environmental lawyer entail?
It means dealing with those laws that affect or control environmental issues, typically pollution, also climate, invasive species, modified organisms, that sort of thing.
All right, thank you for that concise answer. And then maybe you could let us know, as an environmental lawyer, who do you usually represent?
Well, environmental lawyers represent all sorts of different people, and it does depend where you practice. When I practiced with the Ontario government, obviously I was representing the Ontario government and through them, hopefully, the people of Ontario. In private practice, you represent whoever hires you. That can be individuals, municipalities, institutions, small businesses, big businesses, coalitions, associations. There are a remarkable variety of folks who have environmental problems of one kind or another, sometimes that they expect and many times that they don't expect.
All right, that's a great summary. Thank you very much. And I guess you kind of already touched on this when you mentioned who you represent. You said that this is understandably really closely linked with who you're working for.
Yeah.
But yeah, could you tell us a bit more about what types of places employ environmental lawyers? We came across the term law boutique when we were doing a bit of research on your career. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot that people our age don't know about that stuff. So, yeah, if you could let us know a bit about that.
So most environmental lawyers work either for governments, law firms, or big businesses. There are environmental law departments of one kind or another at the federal level, at the provincial levels, and also in many larger municipalities. Large full-service law firms these days have to offer environmental law services to their clients in one way or another, either in-house or in a link with someone else. There have also been over the years a number of small independent law firms. And you mentioned I ran my own independent law firm for 25 years and I've reopened it now in a smaller way. So, but most people work, as I say, for governments or for large corporations or for big firms. I did work for government, as you said, for 14 years. I worked for a couple of downtown law firms early and middle in my career, and I think it's fair to say I did not like it. So that's why I ended up starting my own law practice, and I liked that very much, and it was very successful.
That's lovely. Thanks for telling us about that. And now we were wondering if you could elaborate a bit more on what exactly the responsibilities of an environmental lawyer might be, and if this changes drastically depending on who you're working for or who you're representing. Maybe also touch upon that.
Yes, that's a very understandable question, and I can't give you a good answer. It depends entirely what you're doing. And it changes a lot, especially if you're in a client-driven business, which most environmental lawyers are. You can start the day with a pretty good idea of what you're going to do, but it often doesn't end up that way. So very loosely, you can think of any kind of law as involving solicitor work or barrister work. So barrister work is when you're on your feet in a courtroom of some kind, a tribunal, an inquest, the many different kinds of courts. And litigation is pretty much all consuming. When you're in the middle of an intensive period of litigation, my experience has been that's pretty much all you do. I mean, you have to sleep and eat and go to the bathroom, but you don't have to eat away from your desk. You don't you just don't get a lot of breaks. This demands absolutely everything that you have to give on especially on a bigger case. But you can't do that all the time. And litigation tends to come in fits and starts. And so you have a long, long period of time preparing. And then you have these very intense periods when you're actually in front of the court. Aside from litigation entirely is everything else, giving advice, drafting legislation, shepherding the legislation, briefing clients, briefing boards of directors, writing opinions, working on transactions. So the typical day is going to be different for everybody, and it's often not the same on Monday that it is on Thursday. It also depends whether you're on the road. Now, with COVID, I suspect we're all just sitting at our desks looking at computer screens. But before COVID, and hopefully after COVID, there's also, for many lawyers, a lot of time on the road. Certainly, as a traveling prosecutor, as I did for the Ministry of the Environment, I would very frequently wake up in a hotel in some new place that I often somewhere I'd never been before. So if you're in meetings or court all day and then working all evening and trying to get food and get comfortable and get some kind of exercise in a hotel room, there isn't any other time. It also gets quite ridiculous, this whole business of trying to work effectively out of a hotel room, and it is more complicated for women. I can tell you a silly story. Many, many years ago, when I was a prosecutor for the Ministry of Environment, I had a big case in Timmins.
Oh, quick interjection. I actually have a pen pal who lives there.
Okay, well, wonderful. I
Yeah.
had never been to Timmins before this, but I was prosecuting one of the big oil companies who had a major spill and did a huge amount of damage. Anyway, so I had a big team. I had 6 officers that I was working with and 200 pounds of railway parts, and I had a lot of stuff. So I persuaded my boss that I should have a suite in this hotel so that I wouldn't have to be interviewing the witnesses in my bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because you go to work every evening and you have to work with the witnesses. Well, where do you do this? You can't do it in a public space. And if you're working in a city where you don't have an office, I mean, what are you supposed to do? So my boss, who was very understanding, agreed that I could have a suite, and we rented the presidential suite at the Senator Hotel in Timmins.
All right.
It sounded very fancy. Anyway, we got to Timmins and got to the hotel and got the key for the presidential suite and sort of swaggered up to the suite and opened the door. And it was a large room with a very large bed and 6 chairs facing the bed.
Oh.
So I'm standing in the hall with these 6 officers, all male. So the question is it better to take them in one at a time or all 6? Now, the really crazy thing about that is that I had another case in Timmins about 20 years later. And I figured I had learned my lesson. And so I told my secretary that I needed a suite, and it was definitely not to be at the Senator Hotel. So she said, fine, no problem. And she booked me a suite at a hotel with a different name. And I flew up to Timmins and went to the hotel. And it was the same hotel, and it was the same room, and it looked just the same. They had changed the name of the hotel, and they had changed the name of the suite, and they changed the picture on the wall, but it was the very same room with the very same problem. Only by then I knew better, and I walked right back out and went downstairs and made them give us a second room for a meeting room. But anyway, there you go. That's what it was like on the road. There's all kinds of surprises.
Yeah, sounds like there's a lot of travel involved in your work, or at least there used to be.
There's a lot of, that's right. In non-COVID times, there's a lot of travel and there's a lot of unexpected thises and that's.
All right. And then going back to a bit more about the roles of environmental lawyer, I think most of our listeners have basically no exposure to environmental law or even law at all. And I noticed that when you're speaking, you were using words like litigation, like prosecution. And so I was wondering if you could maybe go back a bit and
Explain those, sorry.
yeah, and talk specifically about what these terms mean. And yeah, just kind of like what are the different categories of things you
Yeah,
might do.
no, that's absolutely fair. And I'm sorry, I've lived in this world
No problem. No, it's very understandable.
for almost half a century. So litigation is, I suppose, it's a form of ritualized combat in front of an independent third party. So you'll have 2 or more sides and you'll have a decision maker. The classic example of that is a court, where you're going to have a person on one side and a person on the other side and a judge making the decisions. But there are lots of things that are like courts, but not exactly courts. The coroner's inquests, which look into why people die. There's all kinds of tribunals, like you might have heard of the Landlord and Tenant Board or the Energy Board, which again, there's a decision maker, but they're not a judge. Within the court system, there are civil courts and criminal courts and a few special courts like family courts or drug courts. Criminal courts are where someone representing usually the government or a government agency is asking for punishment of someone who's done something wrong. So if somebody steals your car, then hopefully the police will arrest that person and a government prosecutor will prosecute that person to punish them in order to protect the public interest. But you probably also, I mean, depending on your insurance, you might be out of pocket if that person steals your car. So you might also want to sue that person for compensation for you personally. So there are civil courts which deal with private wrongs. There are the criminal courts which deal with wrongs against the public good as a whole. There are tribunals which deal with all kinds of specialized issues, workers' compensation tribunals, pay equity tribunals. Those wouldn't be environmental tribunals. The Energy Board, the Environmental Review Tribunal, the Land Use Planning Appeal Tribunal. So those are all types of litigation where you have this ritualized combat, and prosecution is a subset of that, dealing with criminal law and things like criminal law. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps. That's a really good summary how a system works overall. And maybe to help us get a bit more into the details of what it means to be an environmental lawyer, could you perhaps walk us through an example of a case that you've worked on, understandably one that you can actually talk about, and what it was like to be on that case or piece of legislation from start to finish?
Well, of course, after so many years, I've got lots and lots of stories, but one I can tell you about that was very public was arbitration over the cost of the blue box. So everybody knows about the blue box, right? You've got your blue box, I hope, where you put things in it.
Oh, recycling, yes.
Okay, so that system costs a lot of money. A lot of people think that the system pays for itself because of the value of whatever you put in it. And unfortunately, that is nowhere near true. The system in Ontario costs hundreds of millions of dollars a year.
Wow, I did not know that.
Right. Most people don't. So in Ontario, a deal was made, not a very good deal for the public, but anyway, a deal was made that the municipalities would pay half the cost of the blue box system, and the companies that sell the packaging, printed paper and packaging that ends up in the box would pay the other half. And in a nutshell, the companies have almost never paid their full half. So that means that the municipalities and municipal taxpayers have been out of pocket. At the time I worked on this case, they were out of pocket about $250 million, which is an awful lot of money for our municipalities, which are always starved for money. So in 2013, the relationship between the municipalities and these big rich companies broke down, and the companies refused to pay. And so the Association of Municipalities of Ontario retained me to fight the big companies for the $115 million that they owed and didn't want to pay. And I'm delighted to tell you that after an entire year's extremely hard work, they were ordered to pay $115 million. It was one of the only years that they ever paid their whole share. It was an arbitration, so it wasn't a normal court. I mean, we did have a judge, but the rules were different from a normal court. But it still involved each side presenting evidence, each side producing witnesses, each lawyer cross-examining the witnesses on the other side. We had, I think, thousands of documents. We had weeks of hearings. It was a massive, massive proceeding, but it was important, and I'm very proud of it.
Yeah, it sounds like a really big case and one that I would be terrified to be the lead on. Could you tell us a bit more about what preparing for that case was like?
Oh dear. Preparing for that case was almost a full-time job for many months. The first challenge was to really understand the legal nature of the claim and the facts it was based on, which you'd think the client would already know, but in fact, what the client knows and what the client tells you is often not immediately useful, and often they don't think, in the same way I didn't think to explain prosecution, there are often a lot of things they don't think to explain. Either they take it for granted, or they think it's obvious, or they don't think it's relevant. So there's a lot of work at the front end of figuring out, well, wait a minute, how did we get into this mess? What exactly does it mean? How does it compare to the terms of legislation? What does the legislation mean? Where did it come from? So there's a lot of figuring stuff out at the beginning, just like, what's the actual story and how can we tell this story and how can we tell it persuasively? And then there is a large amount of work that goes into identifying all the correct documents and organizing them in a logical fashion and figuring out how to present them and how to have them at your fingertips exactly when you need them. Similarly, there's a very big job involved in a big case like this in identifying all the witnesses that you're going to use, persuading the witnesses to cooperate, preparing the witnesses so that they understand what their job is, making sure that I know what they're going to say. And then for each witness, I had to make a long and detailed script where I was clear what was the point I was trying to make. So you got to work backwards from what did I want to be able to say at the end? We showed A, B, C. All right, how am I going to show A? Well, I'm going to show A with this point from witness 1, this point from witness 2, this point from witness 3, and these 27 documents which are going to be introduced through witness 26, right? So then I have to have all of that plotted out so that I don't forget anything, can't rely on the memory. So that when I get to the end of the case, I can say, we can prove A, and here's how we proved it. And you do that over and over and over again for every point. And then you go over and over and over it. And you practice with each witness because the witnesses are nervous. They haven't done this before. They're worried about being cross-examined. They have to know what that's going to be like. So you practice cross-examining. And sometimes it takes witnesses a long time to learn how to answer clearly.
Right.
So sometimes you're going over the same questions with witnesses many times so that they understand what they're being asked and they know how to answer and then stop.
Yeah.
It's very hard for some people to stop.
Yeah, that makes sense. That actually gives, I think, quite a bit of insight into what it's actually what it actually means to work on an environmental law case.
And after you've done all that, then you write out your opening argument where you tell the court you're going to be able to prove all these things. And when it's finished, you write your closing argument when you have to go through and show everything you did prove. You've got to write out what your cross-examination is going to be for the other side's witnesses, knowing that they won't necessarily go that way, but you have to plan it. Anyway, it's endlessly time-consuming and mentally and physically and emotionally exhausting.
For sure. Speaking of maybe wanting to switch gears from things that are mentally and emotionally exhausting, maybe we could take a broader look and you could tell us a bit about the types of roles that are available in the field of environmental law.
I don't know all the rules. Certainly these days we have lots of companies making net zero pledges, looking at ways to reduce their own footprint. We have a growing push for disclosure using under the Task Force for Climate Related Financial Risks. So there's a lot of work on understanding what kind of disclosure is required and how to make it. There's still work, I'm sure, dealing with contaminated sites, with endangered species, with transactions, with getting a full range of government permits. There are cases dealing with accidents and spills, dam failures, trucks of gasoline that turn over, idiots who pump fuel oil into an empty basement and contaminate the house, pesticide cases, air pollution cases, water pollution cases. Think about the Flint lead pipe pollution case there. There are the youth climate lawsuits against the government. Yeah, I don't know what they all are,
Yeah.
but my experience in running my own practice was that I was regularly surprised by what came up and what people needed.
Yeah, thanks for telling us about that. And I guess this is a similar type of question, but in your opinion, what do you think the job outlook is for environmental lawyers in the next few decades while our listeners might be working?
I don't have a crystal ball. I can say that in the 45 years of my career, there have always been more people who want to do environmental law than there has been in paid environmental law work. I mean, even for myself, it took me 10 years to get a full-time paid environmental law job.
Right.
So they're not easy to get. And a lot of people end up working for polluters because those are the people who have the money. So many people think that being an environmental lawyer means being Aaron Brockovich and fighting for the right. And there are some jobs like that, but they don't tend to pay very well. And they tend to involve an awful lot of hard work and not necessarily a lot of victories. So it's important to be, really sure that this is what you want to do because it's not like the movies.
Yeah, absolutely. That is actually along the lines of, I think, what I've heard is that a lot of people want to do environmental law, but they aren't able to. And so, yeah, thanks for being honest about that. I think people will find that helpful. And then along similar lines, if a life science student, like let's say 19, 20 years old, is studying, molecular biology or like environmental sciences and is interested in pursuing a career in environmental law, do you have anything to say about what steps they should perhaps take?
Well, my first step would be to say, really be sure this is something you want to do. Law is hard.
Mm,
You deal with a lot of aggression, right? I mean, as I said, some of law is ritualized aggression. I have certainly had occasion over the years to have to deal with some very unpleasant people.
right.
And I'm sure there are unpleasant people in many walks of life, but there are some in law who are rewarded for it. I mean, I've literally had a big shot lawyer when I was a young female slam a courtroom door in my face just to show that he was important and I was not. So you have to be prepared for a certain degree of aggression. There's a lot of unpleasant jokes about lawyers, and some of them have a grain of truth. So you have to be prepared to live in that world and spend most of your working hours in that world, which not everybody is going to want to do. Not every place in law is like that, but there are a lot. You have to be sure that you really want to do a lot of very, very detailed work. A lot of law involves mastering an enormous weight of detail. So if you prefer big picture stuff and you don't like detail, you probably will not like law.
Right.
If you love being outside, your joy is being in the field, there is not a lot of that in law. So I would suggest that you spend some time reading lawyers' newspapers. Make yourself read what lawyers actually have to read and see, do you think it's really interesting, or do you think, oh my goodness? If reading lawyers' newspapers doesn't appeal to you and lawyers' magazines and those articles bore you, you probably will not like law. So that would be my first thing, is really, law is hard. Getting into it is hard. Doing it is hard. Practicing is hard. So don't do it unless you really, really want. I have loved my career, but it hasn't been easy in any way. And I'm sure there were easier ways to have a life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really great advice. I can somewhat relate to being in, like kind of like a club or a career that has like a tough culture to it. I was in debate for, I mean, it's nowhere near the same thing, but I was in debate like quite intensely for several years in high school as well as in university. And yeah, sometimes like there is a certain culture I think that comes with, certain professions or certain clubs, and it can be tough for sure. So I think that's good to know going into it.
Again, it's not always like that, but
Yeah.
I have found certainly quite a bit more of it than I hoped for.
Right, absolutely. And then maybe switching gears a bit, because I'm sure you would like to talk about some of your other work as well. Could you tell us what it means to be the deputy leader of the Green Party of Ontario?
Well, talk about a complete change in life. Yes, absolutely. Well, as you mentioned, I was the Environmental Commissioner of Ontario. I was the last Environmental Commissioner of Ontario. And the Ford government passed special legislation to break my contract and silence my office after I criticized their destructive climate policies. So last year, after thinking about it for a year and a half, I did join the Green Party, and I am running to be the Green Party candidate in University Rosedale, and I'm looking for volunteers.
Oh,
And I also became a deputy leader of the party, so that we have two deputy leaders, a male and a female, by the Constitution. So being deputy leader means that in addition to having responsibility for running and hopefully winning in my riding, I also have responsibility for the success of the party generally. I spend a lot of time working on policies for the party. I represent the party in meetings and to the press. I provide some encouragement to the riding associations across the province. If we ever get out of COVID, I'm sure it means that I will be also doing more. I don't know how much travel I can do, but certainly want to encourage. We've got strong candidates in a number of ridings, and really hoping to increase the number of Green Party MPPs. Last election was the first time we had an Ontario Green Party MPP with Mike Schreiner, and he's done such an outstanding job. I'm really hoping that the people of Ontario will see that and elect a few more in the next election.
Yeah, that sounds good. And you kind of mentioned this yourself. What motivated you to pursue a position in politics?
Well, I really didn't want to do it. I
So
really didn't.
nothing.
No, I mean, almost literally every single day I was the Environmental Commissioner of Ontario, I gave thanks that my job was to be responsible for good public policy and not politics.
Mm.
But I feel a powerful sense of moral obligation. I think the people of my generation, it was on our watch that climate damage has become so bad, that environmental collapse is so far advanced, and that we owe it to the young people of today to do everything we can to make right what we've done wrong. And I just don't feel morally that I can just stand aside and say, okay, fine, I've had a good life. I've had a great practice, and I've got a nice house, and I'm all right, Jack, and I've taken my turn, somebody else do it. I just don't think that's moral. And so, as long as body and mind will hold out, I feel a powerful obligation to be contributing as I can. And I've very reluctantly had to recognize that running for office is an important and powerful thing, that way that I can contribute. And I'm at a point in my life where, my kids are grown up and independent. And so I'm now more free than I was at almost any other time in my legal career to do something which is financially a terrible idea, enormously time consuming, but of huge public service. So that's why I'm doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. And thank you for saying that. I feel like that's a really good mindset, actually, for someone in public office to have, that I'm not in this because for the power or anything, but I'm in this because I feel like I have a duty for it. So thank you for all the work that you do.
You're welcome. If I was looking for power, the Green Party is probably not the right place.
Yeah, no, yep, agree with you there.
Clearly, I'm in the Green Party because I think it is essential to have better ideas on the political field. And
Yeah.
the old parties are too frightened to do the right things. We saw Canada's inventory report to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change just came out last week, and look at us. Or was the week before? Anyway, look at our emissions up again.
Yeah.
We're going in the wrong direction. So we've had one party in power, we've had another party in power, and look, it hasn't made any difference. So our emissions are still awful. And so the Green Party is much more science focused. We wouldn't get the kind of idiocy we've just had in Ontario, where the scientists were ignored in favor of pollsters. We need science-based decisions, and we need them now because time's running out.
Yeah. And yeah, the last question that we have for you is if you wanted to tell us a little bit about your own podcast, Green Economy Heroes. What's it about, and when did you start it, and why?
Well, as I think I mentioned, after Mr. Ford abolished my office, I spent the next year trying to continue my work as commissioner as best I could with no staff and no money. I kept on traveling the country, talking to people about climate, urging them to take action. And I kept studying the issue and writing opinion pieces and looking for opportunities to do the best work I could and to inspire others. Then, of course, COVID came, and I had an entire year of very busy speaking schedule, and it collapsed because we all had to stay home. So one of the things I decided to do was to start a podcast. I had been thinking for quite a long time that I mostly give people bad news about climate because
Mm-hmm.
the news is bad. And on the question of environmental collapse, mostly the news I give people is bad because the evidence is bad. And when I started as environmental commissioner, that's what people most needed, was to be told that really the news is very bad, because that message had not come across through the mainstream press. But after doing that for 4 or 5 years, I was tired of bad news all the time. And I realized that many audiences knew that we're in trouble, and now we're looking for some kind of hope, some way of finding a way forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I also knew that there are many people in business making a living running businesses that are reducing our carbon footprint. So I thought, these are stories that I don't get to tell very much and that I would love to hear. And I think a lot of other people would love to hear. Maybe I can do a podcast about those folks. And you probably were told the same thing. The average podcast only lasts 7 issues. And I thought, well, I don't know how many of these people I can find, but I can probably find at least a couple of dozen. So, by then COVID will be over, it'll be fine. So I start, right? So I started with an initial list of a couple of dozen companies that I might be able to talk to. And I paid someone to teach me a little bit about starting a podcast. And I hired a recording engineer who knows what he's doing, a Toronto Mike who's great, and paid for it all out of my own pocket. And I just started that way. And the first couple were really nerve wracking and not very good. But gradually I got better, got more comfortable, and to my delight and amazement, there are lots of people. There are so many people, so many different kinds of stories all across Canada. Young people, older people, men and women, small businesses, big businesses, biology, chemistry, engineering, marketing, running businesses that are reducing our carbon footprint. And so we're something over 50 episodes now. I've now stepped it down.
Wow, that is quite a bit.
Yeah, I've now stepped it down to once every 2 weeks because I'm just too busy with everything else. But I get to talk to the most amazing people. And then Mark Bedard, Lion Electric. Well, several, in fact, of the people that I'd interviewed just won the Clean 50 Award. Lion Electric just won a big grant from the federal government. They build electric vehicles, electric buses, electric trucks, which are going to be fantastic in improving inner city life, less air pollution, less noise, as well as reducing our carbon footprint and making it safer for people who live along the bus lines. Last week's guest was Connie Stacy, a woman from Edmonton who was pushing her twins in a stroller, sleep-deprived new mother, and had an idea for a better way to build, to put batteries together to reduce costs and make them much more interchangeable. And so she's got her new business. There's Alexandra Silvestri also just won a Clean 50 award for her project. So I'm getting to talk to amazing people right across the country doing all kinds of things, down to a DJ who lost his job with COVID and started a home business selling shoe maintenance kits so you can keep your expensive running shoes in good condition longer and not have to buy so many new ones and throw out old ones. There's just lots of different ways of doing it, and so many different kinds of people are finding a way. And I am delighted to give them a voice. And also, I'm finding out great new things to buy.
Yeah, that's really great. I absolutely agree. I think it's important to show the progress we're making as well. And we've interviewed several people involved in climate change, like the ECCC and that sort of thing. And I personally find it very helpful to know that even though things are bad, there is also a lot of good things that are happening. So
Well, there are, and it makes my life better to have a solid bar of shampoo with no packaging and no plastic that's lightweight. If I ever do get back to traveling again, it's better to have something that can't spill and doesn't and weighs almost nothing
right.
and is easy to use and does a good job. I mean, it's great being able to, same thing with laundry detergent, right? So I don't have to buy those big jugs of laundry detergent and lug them around anymore. I have these little dry strips that work just as well or better and just come to the house. So there's just so many people doing things that are better and things that I hadn't thought of. Lots and lots of innovators in Canada, and they need our support. So I can help a little bit for them to tell their story, and then other people get inspired and do more. So I'm really delighted to be part of telling that good news story. And thank you for telling your audience about my podcast. Please do check it out.
Yeah, it sounds like a great thing. But yeah, thank you so much for being on our podcast. It was lovely to chat with you. I had such a great time. Thank you so much.
Well, that's so kind of you, Lisa.
Hello, if you've made it all the way here, congratulations. It's time for a review of the podcast. Review of the podcast. Woo. Frida, what does this week's review say?
This week's review is from ArtSci BestSci. They write, super relevant for life/med-sci students at all points of their degrees. The interviews are informative and guests give inspiring and down-to-earth tips. Have been recommending to all my fellow life/med-sci friends, smiley face.
What a lovely review from a lovely username. If you lovely listener, would like to leave us a review, you can do so on Apple Podcasts, link in the show notes. Feel free to include honest feedback about what you think about the show. We would seriously love to hear your thoughts, and we will almost definitely read a review on the show. This has been another episode of So You Got a Life Sci Degree with Dr. Dianne Saxe about environmental law and advocacy. We want to give special thanks to our crew of lovely patrons, including our Little Leaf patrons Naeem, Daniil, Shafiq, and Shamima, and our fantastic foliage patron, Stephanie. If you would like to become a supporter of this podcast, you can visit our Patreon at patreon.com/soyougotalifescidegree. The music you're hearing is No Regrets from audiohub.com. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.